Music for All is proud to sponsor Bandstand. At Music for All, we're about providing positively life-changing experiences. Join us with your marching band at Bands of America or with your concert ensemble at the Music for All National Festival. Students can audition for our honor ensembles or attend camp at the Music for All Summer Symposium, featuring the Sweetwater Director Academy, an amazing week of professional development for directors led by Dr. Nola Jones. Learn more at musicforall.org.
Romeo Music is the leader in audio, video, music, and lighting technology for educators. With a combined nearly 200 years of experience, Romeo Music's subject matter experts understand the struggles that face teachers in today's music classrooms. With a laser focus on educational technology, Romeo Music provides a turnkey solution, everything from audio cables to on-site training. To learn more, visit www.romeomusic.net.
Hello, and welcome to Bandstand, the official podcast of the Tennessee Bandmasters Association. I'm your host, David Aydelott, and I hope you'll join us on a journey through the past, present, and future of bands in Tennessee. We'll delve into the rich history of Tennessee bands, uncovering the hidden gems and legendary figures who shaped the state's band landscape. We'll survey the present, where you'll meet the movers and shakers of today, gaining insights from their expertise and experiences. And we'll gaze towards the future, exploring the exciting possibilities that await Tennessee's school bands. My guest on this episode is David Duarte. David teaches at Washougal High School in Washington and led programs in Arizona and Tennessee before that. His groups have performed at the Midwest Clinic and the Western International Band Clinic. He spent several years as a fine arts administrator and now hosts a Music for All podcast called Culture Before Content. David and I speak about his career, building a strong culture in a band program, and other topics relevant to music education. Okay, everybody, we have David Duarte, who is the director of bands at Washougal High School in Washington. Did I say it right, David?
You did say it right.
Okay,
Yay.
I'm impressed with myself. I should stop now. And also, David is the host of Culture Before Content, which is a podcast sponsored by Music for All. So, David, welcome to Bandstand.
Well, thank you so much. This is great.
So tell us a little bit about what you do up in Washington. You have some Tennessee roots. You were here for a couple of years, 3 or 4 years?
2 years.
Yep. Made a big impact while you were here. So give us your story real quick.
Well, I'll give you my quick story. Is I'm a native-born Arizonan, taught there for many, many, many years until I was age 51, actually. And then I retired because there's a system to retirement. So then one day I was in a Dillard's at the mall, and this woman called Nola Jones gave me a phone call and said, "David, I have a job for you." And then next thing I know, I was moving to Nashville. And I was at the Nashville School of the Arts. I followed Glenn Fugit, one of my super favorite people on this.
What a troublemaker he is.
Yeah. You know, what's terrible is when you follow somebody and you actually like them. It's great. And so then I taught and just had a great time, and then COVID. And so then what happened was it was that time that I could decide whether I was going to stay it out or move. But I knew I was going to retire to the Pacific Northwest. That was always my dream. That was the plan. Actually, that was what I was trying to do when Nola gave me that call. And then I ended up getting a job at Washougal. It posted up on one of those feeds, I think it was Indeed.com, and I contacted the principal, and lo and behold, here we are on year 4.
Well, we're glad. We're glad you made a stop in Nashville. You are the host of this podcast called Culture Before Content, which has become a great resource for lots of teachers. And so I want to talk a little bit about the podcast, but mostly I want to talk about band culture and culture building. When did this become important for you as a teacher?
I think it's not so much as when it became important for me as I realized the secrets to my success, because I think sometimes success is 20 hindsight. And I think that's what it was, is I was trying to figure out some of the patterns in my teaching and where they came from. And I think it actually started when I became the fine arts administrator, because I started going into classrooms thinking that it was what, what I did was what everybody did. And then lo and behold, that is definitely not the case. We all do it quite different. But I think the roots of culture actually came from when I started teaching, noticing the patterns of what it took to take somebody, I mean, a child, a band, from like maybe a basic level to a very high level. And a lot of that came with just trying to discover what those patterns were. And it was, yeah, it's kind of like built off the content, but really it comes down to the culture to get to that content. So, I'm on my sixth high school, believe it or not. Um, and the pattern kind of follows this magical way, and it just gets better, better, better. And it takes about 6 7 years before you finally get through the whole pattern, but by the time you get there, everything's going. And the best part is, the harder I work in the beginning, the less I'm working now. Like, the
Yes.
students do all the work. Really, it comes down to, it's my belief that how the classroom functions is more important. Not more important, I shouldn't say that. See, all the things I say, it's not that it's more important, it's just that I believe you can't have good content without having culture in place. And I think most people who are successful have that culture in place to get to that content.
When you started teaching, how much did you teach like the way you were taught?
Um, that's kind of a good question, because I started my career. I got my first job when I was actually halftime choir and halftime band, and I remember my choir experience was like zero, and so I just kind of had to go. I got kind of thrown to the wolves on teaching choir, and I actually went back to my high school. So the thing, I think the problem was, when I went to teach when I started my career, I had a false sense because my high school band director was also my colleague,
Hmm.
and so I think a lot of those things were in place, and it was able for me to like regurgitate or resuscitate or do all those things to do what I did. And then choir really became my chance to try it out, and it worked. And it all came down really to, how much do I teach the same? Probably a little bit, a lot, because I really learned a lot from my high school band director. Came back and worked with my program, and worked there for 4 years. So I mean, I pretty much had continuity of my high school from age 13 until I was 26.
That's great. I think a lot of people get stuck to when they start teaching, they just kind of do what they did when they were a band kid. And you have to skin your knee a little bit to learn that maybe there's another way, or maybe you get a chance, as you talked about, to see other folks teach and learn some new ways to do things, begin to think on your own a little bit.
Well, I can tell you probably the biggest thing that happened was actually teaching choir. And before that,
Hmm.
I was like, this close to becoming a general music teacher. And I think that the thing is, I was always built to teach band. I've always been like a high school band director in my head. But if I wouldn't have had that general music experience and that choir experience, I
Hmm.
don't think I would have the success that I have, because I think some of the things that, you talk about how we used to teach. Yeah, you can't teach choir like the way you teach band, and you
Right.
definitely cannot teach general music like they're band kids. So I think a lot of it came, I kind of got handed like the silver platter, so to speak, in terms of talent level when I started. So it really took until the second job before me to discover what teaching was. But in that time, I was able to work on my culture, because it was all in place. Parent activities were all in place, the kids, the discipline, the management was all in place, and I really didn't have to learn it until I was in my fifth year of teaching.
I guess my question for you is, for people that maybe haven't sort of keyed into this, I mean, how do you define it? What is your one or two sentence definition of culture in an ensemble like band?
To me, culture is where you go teach, and the way the students react and the way the students act. So it's kind of like reaction and action. It's it's a combination between your expectations and theirs. And I always use, like, I always have, if you could see my hands, I have my hands apart. And then, like, my expectations are way up here and the kids are here. And it's taking time to get it in alignment so that everyone's expectations are the same. And to me, that's what culture is. Once we have a combined objective where we're all working on the same page, that's culture,
Yeah.
because that's what we believe in. It goes back to perception and reality. The reality is great, but it's really just getting that perception of what we want in our classrooms to be. Because if we're all under that same perception, you're going to build to your ultimate reality.
Shared vision. That was the
Yep,
phrase we used a lot at
correct.
Franklin, was shared vision. I think it's also it's sort of the unseen elements of a classroom too, right? If you walked in and you weren't paying attention, you might just see that it's a teacher on the podium leading through a rehearsal, but it's the unseen things that are the culture elements. It's the way the students look at each other when a passage goes really well or goes poorly. It's the little comments they make when they're putting their instruments back in the lockers. It's the things that aren't really obvious that are oftentimes the part that drives the program more than what folks maybe think about. Does that make sense how
Oh,
I'm saying this?
oh yeah, definitely for sure. I mean, I think about this, like, everyone thinks that you can just walk into a room and immediately, command the room to your liking. And the truth is, like, here I am on year 4, and I feel like I finally have a hold of this band program. Finally, it took that long. I mean, last year, I think I stressed out more than the kids did. The kids had a good time, but I just think it took from COVID. Because I took over I was the first new director after the kids returned, but that first year, it was I just kind of grinned and bear it. There was no all that I believe in was there. I know what to believe in, but I also know how to let the kids learn it. And I think that's one of the other things that I believe about culture is it's my culture that I believe in, but trying to get the kids to do it takes time, takes
Hmm.
belief, takes practice, takes, well, this didn't work with this set of kids. Like, I can tell you flat out, the kids in Nashville versus the kids in Arizona versus my kids up here in the Pacific Northwest, completely different.
Yeah.
Like, they just react different. I've had to learn the Pacific Northwest.
How important is it to be more of a facilitator or a guide nowadays?
I will 100%. I think that's, I even tell my kids that I'm not your teacher. I am your guide. I am here for you. This is not about what I want. This is about what you want. It's just that it's my job in my head without telling them that I want them to want what I want, but I'm not going to tell them. I'm going to show them, and I'm just keep, I call it a demand-based economy. Too many of us are supply. I think that's what it is. When I was younger, I was so supply side.
Yeah.
I was a driver. I was a taskmaster. I was
It was
kind of
all on
mean.
you.
Yeah, I was kind of mean,
Yeah.
coming out of speaking about how
Yeah.
did you teach when I taught. Actually, my directors weren't, and I think that was just something I was. But now it's under the thing, if they're not going to do it, it's now it's what I believe is anything that doesn't go my way is my fault. And
Hmm.
so I just believe in that word guide, because that's, I even tell, it's funny you say that's what I tell the kids. I'm not your teacher. I'm your guide. And this is my classroom for you. And it's not what do you want, but how do we get it to be the best from what you want?
Let's talk about nuts and bolts with that. What does
All
that
right.
look like to be a guide more than being the sort of autocratic old image of what a band director
Yeah.
was?
Well, I guess I'm gonna pull on my fine arts admin here. I have a list of benchmarks that where a kid should be at. And for me, and for my examples, for the most part, band starts in grade 5. So I've got where kids should be by the end of 6th grade, where they should be by the end of 8th grade, where they should be when they start high school, middle of high school, and then the superstars versus that. And I have that guide. And
Hmm.
so to me, that's where the kids need to be. And so if I don't set these benchmarks and give these kids, places where they should be, or what, it's hard for me to do that. So it's kind of, it really is comes down to standards, but it's not state standards, national standards. It's my standards for the band program that I want. And like I said, how I treated Nashville school, Nashville School for the Arts, no offense, unfair, because I had students audition to come to my school. I just had crazy good talent.
Yeah.
But at the school that I'm at now, we were barely playing grade 1.5 when I started. And my brain is, I just went from Armenian dances and now I have to go to Byzantine dances. But at no point, and this is the one I want to tell the audience, at no point was I a different teacher. I
Yep.
work harder at the bands that have less than I did with the bands that have more.
Yeah.
So that what does it look like comes down to knowing what to do when you're given when you're dealt with what you're given, and taking it and moving it forward.
You write a lot about flipped classrooms as well. So
Yes.
that I want you to talk about that. But how important is it to you did this gesture a minute ago with your hands,
Hmm.
illustrating a gap between where you are and the students are, and then the closing that gap. How important is it to be comfortable with there being a gap? It's like I tell young teachers, you walk into a room that's a hot room and you set the thermostat for what you want it to be. You want to set it to 68 degrees, but it's 75, 74. You're going to have to be uncomfortable for a little bit until it's all lined up.
I'll give you an analogy. I am fascinated with any person that can teach kindergarten,
Mm-hmm.
because there is no greater set of people on this planet that know what chaos looks like, but they're okay with it. And I think that's what it has come down to for me, and defining this culture is, I know there's going to be a lot of chaos when you take over. Like, and I always say this to the new teachers out there: when you take over, the last thing you should do is change. You're going to have to take what's given to you and make little increments of change, because if you make it change, you could accidentally do the wrong thing. But you've got to be okay with being uncomfortable and letting it go. The
Mm-hmm.
very first year, I will call it, and I said it before, grin and bear it. Take what you get, analyze it, figure out a way to get it better. But at no point can you demand that it change. You have to want it to change, and you have to make the students want it to change.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty bad at that. I think
I
also that
was.
you can't expect the kids to be how should I say this? What book did I read this in? This is in Talent Code,
Hmm.
where they talk about the difference between an American mathematics classroom and a Japanese mathematics classroom. Sometimes the Japanese teachers will intentionally create a problem that's not solvable, so that the students have to spend an entire class period struggling with a problem that can't be solved. And that struggle is how they build their myelin, as opposed to some examples we see where the teacher is sort of leading a discussion through a mathematics problem, but really it's sort of a guided multiple choice where the teacher is just trying to trick the kids into saying the right answer. So you have to also be comfortable with the kids struggling a little bit too, right? If you're going into flipped classroom and you're getting them to sort of begin to see things your way, or I shouldn't say it that way, to have that shared vision, then you have to be okay with them making mistakes and skinning their knee a little bit too.
It's almost the opposite of the helicopter parent. You need to let go and let them make mistakes. But here's where the problem, I think, that lies with human nature. You can't take it personal. You
Yeah.
can't get angry because the kids either didn't behave, didn't learn, didn't practice, they fingered B flat 1 and 1. Talk about rage. I'm kidding. But I'm just, what I'm saying is, you've got to let the kids fail in order to succeed. And I think fails is the wrong word. You've got to let them struggle. You've got to let them do it. But you've got, more importantly, if you keep telling them and fixing it, you've taught nothing. And
Yes.
if you keep telling them and fixing it, you've actually solved nothing. But if you let them fix it, they'll fix it forever. I'll do my music analogy, and it came from a band and an observation. Like, if you want a chord to resonate, then work on teaching them how to resonate a chord. Don't work on that chord. Stop teaching that. You have to teach the music in as you go along. But if you want dynamics to change and contrast, then teach contrast. If you want resonation, then teach resonation. That way it applies every single time,
Yes.
as opposed to that instance. And I think a lot of us are instance teachers when we're
That's
young.
another podcast, David.
Oh, I can do that one for days.
I mean, that's like skills-based teaching. Like that's what I'm all up into. So that's absolutely, we should do another podcast on that.
I can talk for hours. I'm just saying.
Okay, going back to that being uncomfortable, if
Yeah.
you're the guide or the facilitator, then you really have to be. You said it a minute ago. You can't get emotional about the
No.
struggle because your role is to be there to support the students. You're casting that vision, and you're helping them get there, and you're reassuring them and giving them perspective as they work through that.
Yeah, and you know what I was thinking, like, when I walked into the classroom and the school that I'm at now, I was alone for pretty much the whole first year. The kids didn't talk to me, and it's not because I wasn't friendly or wasn't their teacher. We didn't know each other that well, and so I was more that teacher framework, and it took a good year before I could start getting the kids to be social. I always say that I have two personas at school. There's business Duarte and there's teacher Duarte, or personal and professional Duarte. So if you're talking to personal Duarte, that's a whole different person than teacher
Mm-hmm.
Duarte or business Duarte. But you can talk to them. Like, we could have the worst rehearsal in the world. We could go in my office and have a conversation about something completely different. And there's no relation to that. I don't
Yes.
hold things. I don't hold kids accountable, or I don't hold kids. I don't take things personally. But to get those, and I think it comes down to, again, relationships. Building relationships takes time, and really you want to build the right kind and the right type of relationship. And I say personal with my kids, they only get to know so much about me as a human, but I am a human that's there. I mean, let's be honest. It's just, as long as I have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, I can do anything. If I don't have those two things, it's going to be a bad day for you, Dave, or you kids. I'm just throwing that out there.
Back on the flipped classroom,
Yeah, you got it.
what are some things that you did as you approached that process? Because some of our listeners might not be completely aware of what flipped classroom means.
Well, let me do my version of. Like I said, part of my arsenal is I became a fine arts administrator, much like for some of you out there, and even you. That's how we met. We actually met. You looking for my stuff, not realizing I lived down the road from you
It was
at the
hilarious.
time. It was hilarious. I was on the 65, and I was actually on my way down to Franklin. Anyway, um, the flipped classroom is, think of that a classroom as, in, every kid does homework at home, every kid does schoolwork in school. Flip it. So if you think about it in terms of band, we play music in school and they practice at home. Flip it. And I will mention his name because he's one of the most geniuses out there that everyone should get to know and meet him. His name is David Coons. He lives in Arizona. The man is a complete musical genius. And if you ever want, he will talk to anyone. But he pretty much said it and it solved it because he took over my program at Deer Valley. He was actually my high school band director, took over for me when I went, and then David took over for Bud when after Bud left. What I learned from him is he has no expectations for the kids to practice at home. And because you got to understand, I came from a Title I school, and so
Mm-hmm.
availability of practice at home is apartments. Ability even for kids just to play their instruments. It's different in different socioeconomics. It's different in different places. Here in Washougal, it is very different. Kids practicing at home. Some of these people live, it just depends on where they live. So what I learned is I can't have that expectation of practice from all of my students if they don't have access to resources. So the flipped classroom came from, like, number one, let's get the homework in school and let's give the schoolwork at home. And that's how I teach my after school jazz band. We're not supposed to be rehearsing in jazz after school. They're supposed to be, let's get the things that we need to practice and do that. And then we'll get the ensemble actually when you're away, submit me some recordings so I can hear where you're at. And then by the time we go to put it together, it's already done. And so I've done a lot of that. So for example, if I need I make, by the way, I make students memorize every march I ever do. So what's the best way to flip a classroom? Let's do memorization quizzes on the march, because that way the practice takes place, and I can do that at school. I can send them, you got 20 minutes and then you're going to come play for me. And it's amazing what it does, because to the power of what sectionals do. And that's the other thing too. I can't do sectionals after school. My school is tiny. There's 950 kids about in my school. I try to run up against sports because my kids are the
Mm-hmm.
sports. I'm half the track team, half the golf team, I'm half of every team. And so if I try to do anything at night or after school, I'm going to be losing half of my kids. So how do I get sectionals in without giving up the time in my classroom? And that's what I'm saying. So to me, the flip classroom is allow those things that you want from your kids. You want 12 keys? Well, then put 12 keys and practice time for it in your classroom, but then put the assignment or put the playing of it at home. Like they can send the recording, or they can do the recording at school. You just got to find different opportunities for them to do it. And so I do something very controversial with my own program. Is I actually embed my jazz band inside of my wind ensemble. And so we only get half the rehearsals of a normal wind ensemble. That does upset a few people, but what I've learned in my old age is I do not care, because I'm teaching my kids and they're getting the experience out of it, and that works. And yeah, we're going up against programs that get twice as much rehearsal, but then it comes down to programming. It comes down to practice. And again, I embed all of that instruction on all 12 keys into my first 20, 30 minutes of I think in balance of my rehearsals, I rehearse half. The other half is warm-ups, techniques, and things that those kids need to know. Like this week,
Bless you, sir.
It's all 12 key week.
Yes.
It's all 12 key week. So these poor freshmen are going to be like, hey, no, I F sharp. What? F sharp. When you play F, F sharp. So I've learned how to teach. I just believe it. My sixth grade band teacher taught me. We had to play all 12 scales to get to middle school band, and we were tricked into doing that. So if I can do it in sixth grade, my opinion is everyone and every single person in my band in sixth grade learned all 12 keys. So that became the impetus behind my instruction, all 12 keys by high school.
Yeah.
And so whether or not a kid can even hold an instrument, they're going to learn to play all 12 keys within the year. And like the chances of them failing that, 0.
The relationship between you and your students is it's precious. You have to treasure that relationship. And one of the ways that I'd learned to do this was to be completely transparent about what we were working on. So Jacob Campos and I at Franklin, it actually happened accidentally because there was a year where we did not have common planning. And so we planned in a shared Excel spreadsheet. So when I had my planning, I would write what I wanted to do. Jacob would go in his planning and see that and change it all or argue with me, and we would work through that. And we started giving that to the kids so we could say, hey, next week on Thursday, this really hard part that you've been dreading, it's coming on Thursday. So we weren't doing the thing where we surprise kids with the most difficult part of the work that we're working on, put them in a position where they can't be successful, spoil that relationship. We wanted to operate with complete transparency when it comes to that. Do you have anything about that as well?
Oh yeah, actually, it's funny you say that. My concerts were a couple weeks ago, and so we're doing a trip this Saturday. We're going to the coast, and I'm taking my band. It's a trick though. It's just we're taking the jazz band to go have basically a place where I can have them for the whole day. We can learn some music, and so when we got new music last week, I said, "Hey, we're doing a concert on 3 pieces of music, and we don't really have time to rehearse
Hmm.
it." And so here's the expectations: we got to have Laura done by Tuesday. We have to have I forget all the tunes that we're doing. We have to have gosh, I totally forgot. Oh, second tune has to be done by Wednesday, and the third tune has to be done by Friday. And believe it or not, again, I let my kids rehearse themselves. They have to earn me for rehearsal. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to rehearse my jazz band until they can play the music. There's no point of me going in, and that's part of that flipped classroom that we go back to. But my jazz band has to earn me. But they are so good and so wanting to learn that's I said that's that demand based economy.
Yeah.
There's a demand for those kids to want to play jazz. So then what happens is they know that if they want me to come to rehearsal, then they better practice. Because if I show up to rehearsal and they can't play the music, I'm not coming back. I'll come back when you've got this learned. Here's a recording. Go sound like that. Oh yeah, it's wave and sofrito. I just remembered the other 2 pieces. But that's that. My point is we're going to give a concert this Friday. I've heard my band play half of Laura on Friday of last week, and they sound great for having, they sight read pretty darn well, and that they sound great for that. But that's the expectation. My kids know where we need to be. So like I'll be very transparent. I underprogrammed my holiday concert, and I did not know that until I passed it out. We read through it. I'm like, I underprogrammed by about 1 grade level the whole thing through. So that's why I'm going to spend my time doing key signature madness. We're going to do
Mm-hmm.
third scales, thirds, and so that we're just going to this is a great time to add that in. Get some of the stuff I need for festival. When we get into G flat and D flat, I'm good. But right now we're in B flat and E flat. I think we can take some time to work on those skills. But when we have stuff that's hard, that's the expectations. Okay, kids, this is what did we do on our last concert that was hard? I'm trying to think of whatever we did last on the concert. We did oh yeah, we did American Elegy, and so here are the canon has to be done and perfect by these days, and this is the day we're going to work on it, and do not come unprepared. And it's not said as a threat. I mean, I don't think my kids think I'm threatening. If anything, probably should be a little harder from time to time. See, I've gotten totally reversed now, but having those expectations. One of my guests talked to this on my podcast, Tom Cox, and that I planned exactly when it's difficult for my kids so that they know. And then also I know when to actually make that a point, because you can run something difficult and know, again, this goes back with being comfortable. I'm okay with something not being 100% clean if it's difficult and tactical. I'm not okay if it's not clean, if that on Tuesday we're going to test measures 84 to 107. That's when I'm not, and that's what has to be in place. And I guess planning, score study, all those things have to be in place. Like I already know my rehearsals all the way to my concerts. And again, you're talking to a guy who does half the rehearsals of any band, but
Mm-hmm.
my expectation is it sounds just as good.
Yeah. And that's that alignment of that shared expectations and shared vision.
Yep.
Can you talk about, you wrote an article about data and the art of student progress.
Absolutely.
How does that line up with culture building?
Well, culture building that goes back with expectation, and so the article, this I wrote this for Smart Music years and years ago. They contacted me to write an article because I was doing that was back when standards based grading was making its appearance, and so like for example, if we're talking about those contrasts, so like if you want to tell that your kids can do a dynamic contrast from forte to piano, you've got to give them some type of scale and some type of score. And so that comes down to building that inner competitiveness, not like being better than everyone, the inner competitive, that's if this is the expectation, I'm going to go and achieve it. So the data is feedback. And so I can give feedback on anything. When it comes to like festivals, I've created a festival in Deer Valley where they had to come in September and then they had to come in May. Totally different music, but the point is that when they got assessed in May, when they got assessed in September, it was building up those things that why it goes back to what we were talking about. If you want to teach that resonation, they should teach resonation. Don't teach that chord. And so many teachers, in my observation, teach to the moment rather than teaching the concepts. And it's my belief that we have to give concepts. So that data is all the concepts that I teach in a year and giving my kids feedback, because it also gives me, it's really feedback for me and not the kids. How well are we doing dynamic contrast? How well can you play a piano? How well are you playing with clarity? Because that's the word of my band, by the way. If you ask my kids what's the answer, they don't even have to know the question. Say what's the answer, they will flat out just say clarity, because they know that is the answer. Because it answers clear articulation, clear sounds, clear expectations, just clarity. If we don't have clarity, we don't know what we're doing.
So you're tracking the students' skills that they can apply, that they then can apply to a variety of circumstances.
Correct.
And you're
doesn't matter.
providing data based on their ability to demonstrate these skills.
Yeah, and I've got band kind of down to the three things. If you want to go on the musical side of it, it's sound, the sounds that we make, it's musicality, and then it's the other performing factors. And so if you break it down to those three areas, that's pretty much what we teach. How well does the band sound? When you become a judge, when you start evaluating bands, I think your perception of how to teach changes on that day, because it's the first time you stop doing, well, I do that. Well, this is what the judges say. And you start going to, wow, if they would just do this, if they would just do that. Difficult technical passages, spend more time on this and watch the success. And that's the same for my kids. That's why we do the 12 keys. So if we're doing, broken thirds, da, 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 we're doing those in the key of F sharp. If you don't have clarity, if you're not giving them feedback, because it's not just about playing, I think too many band directors, too many musicians in general focus on two things, notes and rhythms.
Yes.
And I will say this, that's the two things we shouldn't teach. And I don't mean that exactly. And it's not like don't take that literally, but that's what we shouldn't be assessing. We should not be, the notes are supposed to be right. And the notes and the rhythms are supposed to be right. So get those in place first off and be shocked at what you can teach. Matter of fact, I will say this, the more I've learned to let go, the better my bands play.
And choosing music is incredibly important in that, right? You said a minute ago about you underprogrammed by a grade level. That's much better than the other side.
Oh yeah, that would be last year's concert.
Yeah, I've done that too.
My kids wanted to play oh my gosh, the Samuel Hazel piece. Arabesque. And I fell for it because I thought that they were ready to play it musically. They were not ready to rehearse maturity wise. And when those two met in conflict last year, that's when I kind of started to realize that's why I said my own culture, I had to take a hard reset, because we were definitely not ready with a band that was led by sophomores, because most of my program got decimated by COVID. When I had a band being led by sophomores, it was not the way to go. I should have not because they couldn't play it. It's just they weren't ready to rehearse as a wind ensemble at that point.
What about accountability things in your class? Do kids ever play by themselves in class?
All the time.
Okay.
All the time. I will flat, what's funny? We talk about anxiety a lot these days, and I will flat out, I have a ton of anxiety. I don't think I would function if I didn't have my anxiety, because I'll be anxious about tomorrow's rehearsal until I get there, or even just showing up. I haven't seen the kids for 3 days. I'm going to freak out. They're not going to be prepared. And then I get in the classroom and I just go to this happy place. Well, what I learned about anxiety is I can cold call a kid now, and it's getting them comfortable. I teach scales, by the way, through tetrachords. I use Adam's family, and I just teach all 12 tetrachords, put them together. Oh, scales. And so I can cold call a kid. Hey, F sharp. Hey, you know what? Let's take 30 seconds. Everyone practice Adam's family in the key of F sharp. I don't know why I'm picking on F sharp today. It's because I was doing that musical today, I think. And it was G flat. I'm just saying, and that's, again, think about that. G flat and F sharp. Oh yeah, they're the sound. Yeah, they don't play the same. They don't read the same at all. But I can cold call. Hey, play it. Hey, oh, you don't got that. Go to the next one. Play it. Because what happens is if it's okay not to be perfect, they'll try harder. Like, if a kid can't play it, and I've told them, you can always say pass. if you're not comfortable, you can always say pass. But what I found out is once I've started cold calling them enough on anything and everything, they'll just do it. They, and it's just one of those things. And if they say they have anxiety, or I'll talk to them in my classroom after. I'm like, just say pass, and I said we'll know what it means, and then come play for. And that's the other thing. If they pass, I'll want them to come play for me at some point, so I can personalize it. So I said, I know you didn't play for the class, but I do want to hear it, or send me a recording. We have Google Classroom, the ultimate not best way to well, it's so simple. I need something more complex for what I do. I
Yeah.
miss Canvas. Just throwing that out there, but so yeah, so again, they may not have to do it in the classroom for that point, but every kid has to play for me all the time, all the time. Oh, here's a great one. My kids have Chromebooks, and we ended up playing at a marching band festival because my band's really a pep band where I'm at. We don't have marching band. It kind of rains up here, and so my band went and entertained with 5 tunes, and we played the Star Spangled Banner. I had in my wind ensemble, I set them up in a grid. I said, okay, put your Chromebooks on your stands. And I said, you know what? Let's play the Star Spangled Banner by memory. And when they had those Chromebooks in front of them and they hit record, I could hear every single kid doing the memorization test. So I started doing that, and that's great. Here, we're going to play section 47 to 54. Put your Chromebooks on and hit record and submit. It is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I can't hear them, they don't know that. Although I think I just told them, but I mean, they don't know that, but I can still hear just enough in there to tell if they can't. I can see fingers, I can see embouchure, I can see all those things. But what a time saving on getting my kids to play for me 1-to-1 by having them all play at the same time, and then being able to assess them.
Yeah.
I mean, fantastic.
They've got to play for each other. They've got to play in front of class because it's a performance-based class, right? There is the performance element they have to learn to cope with. Also, you're never going to get clarity in matching if you don't hear them play individually. And the next thing is you have to sort of till the garden before you jump into this. So if you're a teacher that's listening to this and you are thinking, maybe I'm going to have my kids playing individually more, I would say do it within the parameters that are already established. Don't overshoot that. Keep it simple for them the first time. And then it's also a chance for the other kids to be supportive. If you say you want to be a good human and be supportive of your fellow students, then this is your chance to do it. So if something goes wonky, which we all have those moments, then respond appropriately. It's a chance for you to be a supportive human being.
On those lines, one of my first guests, Matt Wood, on my first podcast, back in the day, he gave me the greatest suggestion, and I do it to this day. If you want kids to play for you individually, get them to talk to you individually. And there's a trick. Start like tomorrow. I'll do it flat out. I'm teaching choir this year, and it's my first year with the choir because it kind of had a complete collapse. So it's my job to put it back together again. Those kids are having the time of their life, but we always start Mondays. Well, tomorrow's Tuesday, but we always start with, hey, anyone do something fun this weekend they want to share? Did anyone do something, or did anyone do anything musical they want to share? Let them. The kids that you don't realize will start to talk. And that way, when we do the musical things, they're already comfortable because they've already talked in front of the room.
Yeah.
So that was one of those tricks that I've learned that completely paid off. I do it all the time now.
I love it. Okay. If I'm a person who's never really thought about designing a culture, how do I get started?
Well, I think it goes back with maybe taking some time, either reflection, writing it down, and somewhere. What does your classroom in your head look like to you? Because you said it, we do what we were taught. And so how much do you do from what you were taught? A lot of us coming out of college, we try to teach our bands like college bands, which by the way, does not work all that well if you don't have the horses for it. But if you don't know what you want from your classroom, like, when you go to wave your baton for the first time, what do you want to see? And for me, when they walk in it starts from the door. What do I want to see when they come in from the door? You know what I don't want to see when they come in from the door? Socialization. The hallway's right there, kids. You walk in that classroom, it's banned 100% from start to finish, but socialization ends at the door. You got and I'm nice. Maybe I'm too nice. I give them 3 minutes to get their chair set up because I'm kind of mean and don't set up for them sometimes. Chair set up, stand set up, instrument set up, everything. They're running through things in their thing, but those 3 minutes look a certain way to me, and I can assess and talk about data and feedback. I can give kids. I have like little I have like not red slips, but I have like things where I can hand kids a piece of paper that says hey, or even for even lockers. That's one of those things that's also a culture. The only thing I want in your locker is your instrument, your folder, maybe parts that go with your instrument, but I don't want to see paper. I don't want to see anything else in there. And I can give them feedback based on that. But when they walk in, and it goes back to, hey, you get a locker, not a demerit, but I'm just, hey, locker check. If you want that locker privilege, you need to take care of it because that's the expectation that we have here. And so when they walk in the door, I want to see that they're quiet. So what do you want to see when you walk in the door? Some people might want to say, oh, it's fine. I want them to just, get to know each other. But my rehearsals start generally at 1:25. That means at 1:28. Yeah, here we go. Let's go with some Remington. It starts with Remington at 1:28, flat out. And with my concept of jazz band, the kids that aren't in jazz band do symphonic band. So I have the kids that are not. It's really great actually, because pretty much it's the top kids that are from the wind ensemble that are the jazz band, and the other 28 kids that are left, that's symphonic band. And I pair them with concert band, and we call it symphonic band. They're working on different literature. They're working on. I've got this whole system that I believe in that works, because I did it at Deer Valley back in the day, and it worked. So I want to see work happening, and then when we rehearse, I have expectations about what they want to sound like, and even better, I have expectations of what I want them to rehearse like, what I want them to behave like, what I want them to do, what I want have ready for me on my podium. All those expectations have to come from everyone but me. What if I'm not there? What if I'm gone for a week? What if I, heaven forbid, miss a week of school because I have a surgery, or I have a personal commitment that I can't get to? And then here's my question for the audience: when you're gone, what does your classroom look like? Because I'll tell you flat out, my kids probably do better when I'm gone than when I'm there, because they have an expectation, and I know it happens because everyone wants to sub for me, because when a sub walks into my room, they literally do nothing. And that started with, it's freshman band, it's percussion. I have a belief of what you asked me what my classroom looks like. It looks like discipline from start to end. It's not about being quiet. It's not it. But if we're going to have a concert and we need to work piece X, Y, and Z, then they should have worked on piece X, Y, and Z. And if they can't rehearse it on their own, they can at least run it, or they can identify parts that they haven't done. They should have done these scales. They should have done all that. But it comes down to, what do you want? It comes down to the way they rehearse, the way they walk into the room, and then the expectations of how they rehearse.
And you have to spend time, again, if you're starting this, you really have to spend time thinking about every granular detail.
And
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and again, it goes back to, if it doesn't happen, it's my fault.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care if the kids are talking, it's my fault. If the kids have management or discipline behaviors, it's my fault, because either I don't mean that the way it sounds, audience. What I mean to say is, I didn't account for something, or didn't have something in place for that not to happen. And yeah, you have kids that are doing things purposeful. That's not what I'm talking about. I still will call it my fault if that kid had a bad day, or that kid went to the restroom for 6 minutes and not for, well, first off, why did they go to the bathroom? It's banned. If those things aren't in place, it's my fault, because I believe in systems process. I have a system for everything, a system for putting the chairs away, a system for passing out music, a system for this, a system for that. And the kids are so into my word systems process that they don't. So there was a breakdown in my system. So I should have been able to forecast that this discipline didn't happen. Even like when a kid doesn't have an instrument, what's the plan? The kid should know what happens if they don't have an instrument, which is rare for high school, just saying. But we do have times where the kid, like, I took my instrument to the shop and Mr. Duarte does not have an extra right now. So there are times that I don't have that. But you're right. What does it granularly look like becomes everything. But if it doesn't go your way, it's your fault. And I don't mean it like it's like take blame and failure. It's more like, what could you have done to make sure that it did happen?
More self-reflection.
Systems process. Yeah. Reflection's my game.
Yeah, no doubt. And you have to also structure your rehearsals in a way that aligns with whatever your expectations are. I don't really have a good way of saying what's not here, but, well, here's an example. I'll use a marching band example. If you want your kids to be self-starters, whether it's marching band or jazz band or whatever, then you have to allow them in the rehearsal to be that. So I've seen directors who do this thing and they say, okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. And then at 4 minutes and 33, at 4 minutes and 30 seconds, all the kids are still sitting down getting water. And the director yells out over the microphone, 30 seconds. And then they get to 10 seconds and they start counting down from 10. And at about 3 seconds left, this mass of humanity runs onto the field. I stopped doing that a long time ago. In fact, I really try to get away from timed breaks, honestly. What I would do is give the kids a break and then wait a reasonable amount of time based on how hot it was in Tennessee that day, you know. And then the first kid that made a move towards the field, that kid was going to get a compliment from the box. That kid was going to get a compliment from a staff member, good hustle, so and so. And the second kid and the third kid. And so we're complimenting the behavior that we want. We allowed them to make a choice. And then when they made the right choice, then we complimented them. And suddenly all these things start to happen, and there's a series of good choices that are happening. But if I had not given them the ability to make that choice, if I had just counted down, then I've taken away their opportunity to learn in that moment.
Yeah, that's an interesting you say that, because I don't know if this is universal, but I just assume it is. But my kids get third quarter off, and so like that's a big thing up here. Everyone gets third quarter off. We traveled to our away game and it was third quarter off. But you're right. I don't tell the kids to be back anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago, because they know when they're supposed to be back. And if anything, go get your concessions and come back. And someday I'll be rich enough I can just provide you with your concessions and you could come back. But I think you're so right on those expectations of what a break is, what time is, that I'm just going over my head of all the things that like that. Like you're just thinking, oh yeah, I don't tell my. Here's another one. If you want rehearsal to start at 5:30 in the after evening, um, or if I have a concert or anything, I've just learned to tell my kids if it's 5:30, which is my call time. I just say I started using the words 5:15 in the parking lot. And then once I did that, once I made that little bitty change, nobody's late.
Yep.
Like it just completely stopped. I used to complain, oh, you're 2 minutes late, you're 3 minutes late. Here I am coming to a podcast. Oh my God, am I going to be late? I'm late sometimes. I wasn't late, audience. I was totally on time. I was early. But
Yeah.
that's the thing. I changed my vernacular of how to talk to my kids on that very same thing. So, and that goes back to take reflection time. Okay, I want the kids there at 5:30, or I need help at 5 o'clock. It is amazing what happens. Or you talk to your leadership council and tell them what you want, and just say, you know what, make it happen. I don't want to know. No, I just know I want to make this happen. And giving out the responsibility, letting go, is the hardest thing I think we can do as a teacher.
Yeah. But it comes back greater than whatever you think you lost in that. It comes back greater. How much does culture depend on this particular school you're at? In other words, let me ask the question this way. If you had all this written down in a Google Doc, could someone find and replace and change your school to their school and just run with it? Or does it need to be based on the cultural norms that are in that particular community?
100%, you can change it to whatever you want. I took over for somebody, and I've done it. I said I've done 6 schools. I've taken over, and I always talk about this. If you want to talk about my greatest failure, just go to Scott Lang's Leader of the Band book. I'm chapter 2, and that is literally this question. I did all the things wrong on a takeover band program. Musically, it was fantastic. Musically, I was there, but what I was not prepared for was why I was there, and those changes. And I was young back then. I missed that, by the way. I was young back then, but those mistakes that I made will never happen again, because I had to learn through my own failure, so to speak. But if I wouldn't have had that failure, I wouldn't have had the success that came after it. And the thing is that year of that school was fine. Like the band was incredible. I mean, it was one of those bands you just get superior. It doesn't matter. They're so good. It was so much the prior director was so good that when I came and took him over, I was not prepared to take over a program at that point, of that caliber, of that nature, of those things. And it doesn't matter whether I had it written down. I know what to do now. And because what happened was I took over the program, Deer Valley, which is the program that I'm known for. I took that over the year later and literally went with don't take this wrong, but I had a failure mindset. This is what I wasn't supposed to even take that job. I even told the principal, no. I went out of guilt because the band director, who was also a good friend of mine, who resigned, that they hired somebody, but then they were moving out of state, and they decided this wasn't working out, and I ended up being a band director again. And I went in with this mindset of like, I'll just do it until it it doesn't work. I had still quit going into that Deer Valley year. I was still ready to give up. I was still ready not to do it because I already went through all those transitions that I had screwed up at Marcos. And so what happened was the kids gave me all the feedback because I had changed and didn't know it. I had made all these things and didn't know it. And I was letting go for the right reasons and didn't know it. I said, success sometimes is hindsight, as and that was it. And one girl, one of my tuba players, I'll never forget it. She walked in the room right when I was just like ready to like literally cry. She goes, "Mr. Duarte, everyone absolutely loves you and you are the best thing that has happened to this school." And that snapped me out of like that conversation, snapped me out of it because I wasn't paying attention. I was so worried about who I was not supposed to be, what I was supposed to be doing. So yeah, you could, I have this belief that culture is something, but it's literally inspiration to create your thing. I read, the Daniel Covey Culture Code. That book spoke to me. I
Incredible.
listened to that book, Nashville School of the Arts. That was my first book going back and forth because I don't know if people realize this. I hadn't taught for 12 years when I took over Nashville School of the Arts. I left high school for 12 years. Um, and I started listening to that book going, oh my God, that's what I believe. And that's, oh my God, I feel that. And that book just spoke to me in a different way. And that's what started that culture. This is what started my culture before content. And then, I started this culture thing about with French because if you want your kids to learn 12 scales, it's not the 12 scales aren't important. It's that culture for them to want to learn it. They should learn it. And the Nashville kids gave me great feedback when I took over. Taking over from Glenn's a little stressful. Again, you don't want to screw up something that's already great. And I was not. And again, Marcos was in my head the whole time. If I'm going to screw up, but the kid said, "Mr. Duarte, you have done fantastic. And we appreciate how you've given us the freedom to take over our band and to make it better." And that was the best part is the kids had done it. I think that was my validation that the prior 20 years was just the world's best and worst learning experience. So can you write it down? You can. It's this not a linear outcome. It's impossible. How I would act at Washougal, the next school over is Camas, which is like a 4A at the big schools here. It's oddly 4A down to 2B. We start over again at one, go back to 2 to B. And so it's still 6 divisions, but they're basically a 6A high school. And I'm basically a 4A high school. It would be 100% different and 100 different expectations. But I just believe that I believe in myself enough to know that I can make anything happen where I'm at if I just believe in it. And I believe the kids feel it. When my kids want to hang out with me after getting home at 3 a.m., I believe I've won the game. When my kids want to go and my pet band is volunteer, when I have 40 kids sign up to go on an event that's just anyone, I believe I've made my way. It's literally feeling tone and just checking in.
Yeah. Belonging cues in culture code. Do you want to do anything else?
Well, I think the only thing I think I'll just add this in. Like culture to me is what I believe in. Because we talked about, how important is the content? The content is the content. That doesn't change. But how we deliver the content is up to us. How we get the content is up to us. What we believe, what is your band's identity? What's your own identity? I think that discovering an identity is also super important to this culture. I have a band right now that I am fascinated with my students. They are so in tune to listening to each other that it's pride. Because if I would have went back to my bands 20 something years ago, we were pretty good at playing loud and we sounded great. We were super powerful, but I didn't realize what I wasn't doing because, I got so enamored with how my marching band sounded and all that power and we were great and blah, blah, blah. And I was getting superior ratings, not realizing, man, my band would score 10 times better if I would just make music. And I adopted that when I was doing administration. I never got a chance to do it. So I got to NSA and I had just started getting it into place. And then I came up here to Washington. And I promise no one plays louder than everyone else. If you can't hear others, you're playing too loud. It's not about volume. We can play as loud as we want, as long as I can hear clarinets, oboes, flutes. I don't care. And they are so good at that concept. That is literally the foundation of what my band program is built upon in both jazz, concert band, choir, and it goes back to clarity. And so that, I think that identity politics of it is super important because there is no culture without a vision of what you want it to be. There is no, if you don't know what your band's identity is, find it. What is, because I know we want to win this, we want to go there and superior that, we want to take first place this. I've played at Midwest. I've played at Wibbick. By the way, if you don't know what Wibbick is, you all need to find out what Wibbick is. It's the ABC College, the band world. Holy cow. It is like everyone should go there. It's great. I've played at Monterey Next Gen. I did IAJE back in the day. I've had the national taste several times. And what I've learned was it was never the goal. It was the outcome of learning to let go and let the kids succeed. Once I stopped competing, I started winning. Once I started listening, the ratings came. It was just, it's not saying that that's how it's not, again, don't take me linear, folks. But once I realized what was important to me, it became important to the kids. Success followed. When you get that letter from Midwest that says, we want you to play, you kind of freak out a little bit, but I look back on it now and I'm trying to repeat those successes. I don't know if I can get to Midwest with my little tiny school, but they sure are starting to sound a lot like it. They're starting to follow those same patterns. Now, if I could find about 20 more instructors, I think I could pull it off, but that's, again, it goes back to access to resources. And don't sell yourself short, people. Access to resources is half of the game of pulling anything off that we do. But if you're by yourself in a small school, big school, whatever, then find your identity, because then you can define who you are and you can defend who you are to yourself, to your community. Because really, if you want my opinion, who your community thinks you are is who you are. And that's who you make happy.
And you have to be authentic.
100%.
You can teach kids to be great musicians playing grade 3 and grade 4 in a town that's 2 hours from a major metropolitan area. They can have an incredible experience as musicians in high school or in middle school. They don't have to be playing the Persichetti Symphony to have a great experience. And back to your thing about how resources affect your program. So, David, what would you say to young teachers? I always ask this question. What's your advice to rising teachers, student teachers, first-year teachers?
Funny you say that. I'm getting a student teacher. My principal came up last football game. He goes, do you want a student teacher? I'm like, you do know my master's thesis is on the student teaching framework. Like, that's literally, like, I live for that, because it's built on reflective practice. Because I believe that's really what the name of the game is reflective practice. So to the newbie out there, find a mentor. And to us old folks out there, where the grays are coming, don't stop coming, be a mentor. And I'll even say this, be a mentor even if nobody asks. Find a mentor even if you can't. Just keep asking questions. It's the same thing I always tell people. Email people. Don't call. No one ever picks up anymore. I'm saying, find access to somebody, ask them questions, and then see if you can find some. And by the way, your mentor can be somebody on campus. It could be a secretary who knows how to do paperwork. Make them your paperwork mentor. I'm not kidding. Find, the middle school band director that knows how to teach from square. Find someone that knows how to speak to you, and then ask questions. And again, you might know the answer, but ask questions of people to get back. You can do that with anyone. I hate to say this, but I use Facebook a lot of times to read people. And sometimes I post on there. I'm getting less and less as I get older, but I do it because I already know some of the answers some of the time. And I know the answers to people some of the time, but that's not what's important. What's important is does this validate what I believe in? Or if I don't know something, am I learning from it? But mentorship is the key to success. If you don't know how to do something, ask, and don't feel like you're ever alone. Someone is always willing to listen.
Great advice. David, thanks for being on Bandstand.
Well, thank you. I miss Tennessee.
Come back. We'll find you a job. Thanks for listening to Bandstand. Bandstand's mission is to build a stronger, more unified band community in Tennessee by fostering meaningful conversations about the past, present, and future of school bands in our state. If you have topic suggestions or need to get in touch with us, email us at tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Your input is important to us, and if you have a topic you'd like to discuss about the past, present, or future of Tennessee bands, please let us know. Again, that email is tbabandstandpodcast@gmail.com. Right now, we're broadcasting on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, so please subscribe, review, and rate Box 5, please. And if you find something interesting or helpful, please share this podcast with your friends. Bandstand is proud to be sponsored by Music for All and Romeo Music. See you next week.